Hey everyone and welcome. Today we are tackling a fundamental topic in programming that seems simple on the surface but is something that confuses so many Python developers, especially when they are starting out. How to properly name your variables. Getting this right from the beginning will make your code cleaner, more professional, and so much easier to work with. Let's start by looking at a piece of code that is very common for beginners. We see things like x equals to 10, y equals to 5, and z equals to x plus y. For names, we might see A1 equals to John and A2 equals to Doe. While this code works perfectly fine, it's not very clear. What do x, y, and z represent? Are they prices, counts, or coordinates? Without more context, we have no idea. This style is often carried over from mathematics, but in programming, clarity is far more important than brevity. Now, let's look at another way to write the exact same logic. Instead of x, we have item price equals to 10. Instead of y, shipping cost equals to 5. The calculation becomes total cost equals to item price plus shipping cost. Suddenly, the code tells a story. It's immediately obvious what these variables are and what the calculation does. The same goes for the names. First name equals to John and last name equals to Doe are infinitely clearer than A1 and A2. Putting them side by side, the difference is night and day. The code on the left is confusing and requires you to guess or remember what each variable holds. The code on the right, the one that uses a descriptive coding style, tells a story. You can read it and understand the programmer's intent instantly. This is the quality we want to strive for in our own code. So how do we achieve this clarity and professionalism? We can boil it down to 6 essential rules for naming variables in Python. We are going to cover using valid characters, understanding case sensitivity, following the snake case convention, naming constants in uppercase, avoiding the reserved words, and most importantly, using meaningful names. Let's break this down one by one. Before we dive into the rules, let's talk about the goal. Why do we follow these rules? Because it makes our code readable, professional, and maintainable. Readable means that you or anyone else can look at your code in 6 months and understand it without having to decipher it like a puzzle. Professional means writing code that follows community standards, making it easier to collaborate with others. Maintainable means the code is easy to debug, update, and expand upon in the future. Good variable names are key to all 3 of these qualities. As we go through the rules, pay special attention to the conventions, especially the one that is most preferred in the Python community, snake case. We'll see exactly what that is in a moment. First up, let's look at what makes a variable name valid in Python. Here are a few examples. User underscore name equals to Alice is a great example of snake case. Age2 equals to 25 is also valid. You can have numbers in your names. Underscore private underscore var equals to secret is valid. A leading underscore is a convention that tells other developers this variable is intended for internal use. First name with a capital N equals to Bob uses Camel case, which is also technically valid. And constant underscore value equals to 100 uses all uppercase, which is the convention for constants. The first and most important rule for character validity is that variable names must start with either a letter or an underscore. That's it. Any other character at the beginning, like a number or a symbol, will cause an error. After that initial character, your variable name can include any letters, both lowercase and uppercase. You can also include numbers in your variable names, as long as they are not the very first character. So H2 is perfectly fine, but 2H is not. Finally, variable names can also include underscores. Underscores are incredibly useful for separating words in variable name to improve readability, which is the foundation of the snake case style. Now let's look at some invalid names. As we just mentioned, a variable name cannot start with a number. If you try to write 2h equals to 25, Python will give you a syntax error because the interpreter sees the 2 and gets confused. Next, hyphens are not allowed in variable names. The variable user-name is invalid because Python interprets the hyphen as the subtraction operator. It would try to calculate the value of a variable user minus the value of a variable name. Similarly, spaces are not allowed. If you try to name a variable user with a space name, Python will see user as one variable and name as another, leading to a syntax error. To separate words, you should use an underscore, like user_name. Finally, you cannot use Python reserved words or keywords as variable names. Words like class, if, for, def, and return have special meanings in the language syntax. Using them for variables will confuse the interpreter. So to quickly recap the key rules for valid characters, a variable name must start with a letter or an underscore. After that, it can contain any combination of letters, numbers, or underscores. That's it. Stick to these two rules and your variable names will always be syntactically valid. Okay, that covers the characters you can use. Our second essential rule is understanding case sensitivity. Python is a case-sensitive language. This means that it treats uppercase and lowercase letters as distinct. So if you have name equals to John and name equals to Alice and name with all capital letters equals to Jack, Python sees these as three completely different and unrelated variables. This is a very common source of bugs for beginners, so always be mindful of your casing. Now that we understand the technical rules, let's move on to style conventions. This is about writing code that is easy to read and feels natural to other Python developers. The most important convention is snake case. The preferred naming style in the Python world is known as snake case. This convention is recommended by PEP 8, which is the official style guide for Python code. Snake case is simple, all words are in lowercase and are separated by underscores. You can see it in examples like user_age, first_name, and shopping_cart_items. It makes variable names easy to read. You may also see another style called camel case. In camel case, you combine words into a single word, capitalizing the first letter of each subsequent word. For example, first name with a capital N, or shopping cart items with a capital C and I. This style is very common in other languages like JavaScript and Java, and while it's technically valid in Python, it's not the preferred convention. So which one should you use? While both are acceptable to the Python interpreter, the Python community strongly prefers snake case for variables and functions. Why? Because following this convention makes your code feel native and consistent to other Python developers. When you are working on a team or contributing to an open source project, consistency is key. Here are some great examples of snake case in action. Customer email, max retry count, database connection string. Notice how these names read almost like natural English. This makes your code self-documenting. Someone can read a line like print, email, customer email, and know exactly what's happening without needing extra comments. Next up on our list of rules is how to name constants. A constant is a variable whose values isn't supposed to change throughout the program's execution. In Python, the convention for naming constants is to use all uppercase letters with underscores separating words. For example, max_users or API_key. It is important to note that Python doesn't actually prevent you from changing the value of a constant. This is purely a convention, a visual cue for developers that says, hey, this rule is important and you probably shouldn't modify it. Here are some practical examples. We could define max users equals 100, API key or the value of pi. Then in our code, we can use these constants, a line like if len of the users greater than the max users is instantly clear about its purpose. Alright, we are making great progress. Our next essential rule is about something we touched on earlier, how to properly avoid reserved words. As a reminder, you must avoid using Python's reserved keywords as variable names. Why? Because these words are a core part of the language syntax. Using them for variables confuses the Python interpreter, which expects them to have their special meaning and will result in a syntax error. Here is a list of Python's reserved words. You don't need to memorize all of them at once, as you'll become familiar with them through practice. The list includes common words like false, true, if, else, for, while, def, class, and return. Your code editor will usually highlight these words, which is a good hint not to use them as variable names. But what if you really need to use a name that happens to be a reserved word? For example, it's common to want a variable named class or list. The widely accepted convention in this case is to simply add a trailing underscore. So instead of class, you would use class underscore. This avoids the conflict with the keyword while keeping the name meaningful. And that brings us to our final and the most important rule of all: use meaningful names. This rule is what truly separates good programmers from great programmers. Your variable names should tell a story. They should clearly and concisely describe the data they hold. Let's look at a powerful example. On the top, we have some code with cryptic names like PA equals to 1000, AI equals to 0.08, and LTY equals to 30. Can you tell what this code does? It's nearly impossible without a comment or deep analysis. Now look at the bottom. The same logic is written with meaningful descriptive names. Principal amount equals to 1000, annual interest rate equals to 0.08, and loan term years equals to 30. Now the code is perfectly clear. We can immediately see that it's calculating the monthly interest for a loan. This is especially true for Boolean variables, which hold either true or false. It's a great practice to name them with a prefix like is underscore, has underscore, or can underscore. For example, is logged in, has permission, is empty. When you use these variables in condition, your code reads like a natural English sentence. If is logged in and has permission, is incredibly readable. So to conclude, remember that naming variables well is not just about following rules, it's about communicating clearly. Good variable names are an investment you make in your code. When you come back to debug that code a few months from now, or when a teammate needs to understand it, you will thank yourself for taking those few extra seconds to write descriptive, meaningful names. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this guide helps you write cleaner and more professional Python code. If you found this tutorial helpful, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe for more tutorials. Happy coding, and I'll see you in the next one.